The Strait of Hormuz is one of the narrowest and most strategically important waterways on Earth. At first glance, it appears almost insignificant on a world map, a narrow strip of water between Iran and Oman. Yet this small corridor has become one of the central pressure points of the modern global economy. Every day, massive oil tankers loaded with crude oil and liquefied natural gas pass through it, connecting the energy-rich Persian Gulf to the rest of the world. Without it, much of the industrialized world would face immediate energy disruption. The geography of the strait explains why it has held importance for thousands of years. It forms the only maritime entrance and exit to the Persian Gulf. Any ship traveling from the Gulf to the Indian Ocean must pass through this narrow corridor. At its narrowest navigable point, the shipping lanes are only a few miles wide. Modern satellite images show giant tankers moving through tightly controlled traffic lanes, almost like cars on a highway. But long before oil tankers existed, this same route carried merchants, spices, pearls, textiles, incense, and armies. In ancient times, the Strait of Hormuz sat at the crossroads of several civilizations. The Persian Empire understood its importance early. Control of Gulf trade routes meant access to commerce flowing between Mesopotamia, India, East Africa, and the Arabian Peninsula. Ancient sailors from Persia, Arabia, and India used monsoon winds to move goods through these waters. Ports near the strait became wealthy centers of trade and taxation. Pearling industries flourished in the Gulf, and caravans arriving from inland Persia linked maritime trade to the great land empires of Asia. During the medieval era, the island kingdom of Hormuz became one of the richest trading centers in the region. Merchants from India, Persia, East Africa, and even China exchanged goods there. The Portuguese recognized the strategic value of the location in the early 16th century and seized control of the area to dominate Indian Ocean trade routes. They built fortifications and attempted to control maritime commerce moving through the Gulf. Later, regional Persian dynasties and European colonial powers competed for influence over the same waters. Long before oil was discovered, the Strait of Hormuz already represented power, wealth, and strategic leverage. Everything changed in the 20th century with the rise of petroleum. The Persian Gulf region contains some of the largest proven oil and natural gas reserves on Earth. Countries surrounding the Gulf, including Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Iran, began exporting enormous quantities of crude oil during the 20th century. Most of those exports had only one practical path to global markets: the Strait of Hormuz. As industrialization accelerated after World War II, global dependence on Gulf oil expanded dramatically. Europe needed fuel for reconstruction. Japan required imported energy for its industrial boom. Later, China, India, and South Korea became major importers as their economies exploded in size. The Strait of Hormuz transformed from a regional trade route into the central artery of the global energy system. Today, roughly 1/5 to 1/4 of the world's seaborne oil trade passes through the strait. Estimates commonly place the volume at around 20 to 23 million barrels of oil per day. Large amounts of liquefied natural gas also move through the corridor, especially from Qatar. Most of the oil moving through the strait originates from Gulf producers. Saudi Arabia exports crude from terminals on its eastern coast. Iraq ships oil from facilities near Basra. Kuwait, Qatar, and the UAE rely heavily on Gulf export terminals. Iran itself also exports through these waters. Giant, very large crude carriers, VLCCs, carry millions of barrels per voyage. These vessels are among the largest moving objects ever built by humanity. The destinations of these shipments reveal how deeply Asia depends on the strait. China is the single largest recipient of oil flowing through Hormuz. India, Japan, and South Korea are also heavily dependent on these shipments. European countries receive smaller but still significant quantities, especially LNG from Qatar. Around 80 to 90% of the crude oil and condensate moving through the strait ultimately heads toward Asian markets. This dependency explains why the Strait of Hormuz is often described as the world's most important oil choke point. A choke point is a narrow route through which critical trade must pass. The global economy depends on a handful of such locations, but few are as vital as Hormuz. The danger is not merely theoretical. For decades, tensions in the region have repeatedly threatened shipping. During the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s, both sides targeted oil tankers in what became known as the Tanker War. Naval escorts and mines turned the Gulf into one of the most militarized waterways on Earth. In recent years, attacks on tankers, drone incidents, sanctions conflicts, and military confrontations have repeatedly raised fears that the strait could become blocked or too dangerous for commercial traffic. What makes the Strait of Hormuz so difficult to replace is not simply geography, it is infrastructure. Many people assume that if the strait became unusable, oil could simply be rerouted elsewhere. In reality, alternatives exist only on a limited scale. Pipelines can bypass portions of the Gulf, but their capacity is far below the total volume normally moving through Hormuz. Saudi Arabia operates the East-West pipeline across its territory to the Red Sea. The UAE has a pipeline connecting Abu Dhabi oil fields to the port of Fujairah outside the Gulf. Iraq has some northern export routes through Turkey, but together these systems cannot fully replace the massive daily flows through Hormuz. Building entirely new pipeline systems would be extraordinarily difficult. Pipelines crossing multiple countries require political agreements, security guarantees, financing, pumping stations, maintenance infrastructure, and decades of stability. Many potential routes would pass through unstable regions or politically sensitive territory. In some cases, mountain ranges and deserts create additional engineering challenges. Even if such pipelines were built, oil still has to reach customers across oceans. Tanker shipping remains the cheapest and most efficient method for moving massive quantities of petroleum globally. One supertanker can carry around 2 million barrels of crude oil in a single voyage. Replacing that scale with rail or trucking is essentially impossible. Alternative sea routes are also limited. Ships cannot magically bypass the Gulf because the Gulf itself is geographically enclosed. Oil loaded at Gulf terminals must physically exit through Hormuz to reach open oceans unless diverted into limited pipeline networks first. Some analysts have explored whether future energy transitions could reduce the strait's importance. Renewable energy, nuclear power, electrification, hydrogen, and expanded domestic energy production in countries like the United States may reduce global oil dependence over time. The U.S. shale boom, for example, significantly reduced American reliance on Gulf oil imports. But despite these changes, the world economy still consumes enormous quantities of oil daily. Aviation, shipping, petrochemicals, plastics, heavy industry, fertilizers, and manufacturing continue to depend heavily on petroleum and natural gas. Asian economies, in particular, remain deeply tied to Gulf energy exports. This is why even temporary disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz can trigger immediate spikes in oil prices, insurance costs, shipping rates, and global economic anxiety. Markets understand that there is no quick replacement for this route. The world has built decades of industrial infrastructure around the assumption that Gulf energy can reliably move through this narrow corridor. And this reveals the deeper reality of the Strait of Hormuz. It is not merely a body of water between two coastlines. It is a reminder that the modern global economy depends on physical geography in ways many people rarely notice. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Your engagement helps the channel grow and helps these ideas reach more curious minds just like yours. Let us know on the comment what topics you'd like to see next, because in science, there's always more of this and that to discover. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.